I wanted to talk about the stuff we did with Uja Music and some of the lessons we learned, both in terms of just working in the creative industry, which is what the NFTs focus on a lot, but also the NFT experiments or things that look like NFTs that we did. So just to preface, Uja Music was a team of amazing people. And this is just my opinion on the lessons and stuff. I know there might be some people in the team that might disagree with the lessons learned. So this is just my perspective. So to give some context, Uja Music, we were one of the first projects that actually launched on Ethereum. In October 2015, we did a DApp that we worked with Imogen Heap with, where it was one of the first royalty payments prototypes. This is the thing you see in the top right. We also did the RSC Ego badge, and then also later experimented with ERC720 properly. I'm going to go through them now just to be more specific, and then share some lessons. So the Imogen Heap prototype was it was just a way to show that with a process of automation using blockchains and the ability to give some sense of transparency, like we can aid musicians, but also more broadly creators. And obviously now almost any NFT platform has some form of reshare and some royalty splits built in, where secondary sales are split between people. And I know, say, Zora has, sorry, I think it's Mirror has like more like built-in splits and payments that work. And this is now an accepted feature of a lot of the platforms. It was an interesting experiment because one of the constraints we had with the Imogen Heap prototype is back in October 2015, the MetaMask didn't exist. There was no extension wallets that were available. It was basically Mist, which was also in alpha, the Ethereum Foundation's wallet slash DApp interface browser. And so we had to build our own wallet into the website. And back then it was called Light Wallets. So, you know, it's now almost no DApp uses this concept, but it's like you had to build in the wallet software into the website itself. So that in itself was like, hey, suddenly you have to get users to understand what else going on. And then there's a wallet, but it's not an extension wallet. It's or even a mobile wallet, nothing like that. So that was also like a very interesting learning curve. I know a lot of people, funded those wallets, and there might be, because back then it was like $1 in Ether, and I assume there's still a few of those wallets that have 1 Ether or so in them, which is, I think, a lot of the early days. I think I ran an article for the pricing for Uja and had bad node setups and lost a few Ether just by people port scanning vulnerable nodes. So I think a lot of people lost some money in the early days. Then in 2017, we had an experiment with RAC where we launched what's called the Ego badge. We also launched the badge with another artist called Giraffage. But this was one of the first attempts for what we would consider to be called music NFTs, where as part of the experience, you collect something that is a souvenir. It is time-stamped in the blockchain. You can prove your sort of early fandom. And again, it's just a souvenir. And obviously, you can buy and sell it. The thing that we did differently to what NFTs look like today is that it was infinite supply based on the fact that when you bought the album and you received the MP3s, this was like a souvenir. In the same way, when you buy albums, physical albums, you get, say, like interesting booklet with lyrics in them, or this was obviously back in the 2000s when these CDs were still a thing. You would get some additional things that made you go, I'm listening to the music and I'm reading the booklet and getting more personally involved or connected with the music. The one image you see here, this was when a different version of MetaMask that still displayed the badge. Back then, in order to get that image in there, you had to submit the actual image plus information to a MetaMask GitHub repo. But now I tried to check if it still exists, and it doesn't. So I'm not sure why that disappeared. Then the next thing we did was, this was then afterwards the NFT standard became a thing. ERC-721 became a thing, just to emphasize the ego badges were ERC-20 tokens. They still exist. And then with the ERC-720 came around, we could more properly display them and better interface and standard. And what we did was, there was one undocumented ERC-721 in the UJO application. And then there was also a more visible ERC-721 that we implemented. The one was the same as the Ego badge, which was when you bought albums, they were ERC-721s minted, but it wasn't documented. So there are a bunch of them out there that does not have proper token URIs, but we thought we should put it in there in case you want to service in the future. And obviously in 2017, like, you could do stuff like that, like just keep it in smart contract code because it was cheap, right? Because I think we budgeted, like, we shouldn't want a user to pay more than $5 to $10 to mint a badge. Obviously, now it costs way a lot more with adoption. And then the other thing we did was the tipping badges. So this was also an attempt to just allow a fan to get a connection with the musician through minting these collectibles, and it was just based on their profile picture. And there were different tiers, like a $5, $10, and like $50 badge, I think, which you could buy, and then we receive back the souvenir, your provenance of being a fan that tipped the musician. That was not opt-in, so I think a lot of musicians were also surprised that this was actually a thing that was happening. And I remember with the RAC store and with the badges, some of the musicians made more from just selling these tipping badges, which was quite interesting. And then we also had a lot of other internal ideations surrounding scarce releases. But the final bit I want to talk about is just some of the things we struggled with, which was we often struggled with the cost. There were a lot of costs to being early. We spent a lot of development time on building infrastructure that we didn't use because everything was new. You had to build everything yourself. We also struggled a lot with deciding whether we should build things for as a product or a platform. Nowadays, it's easier. There's more platforms, right? So you can focus on building product. We also struggled with user education. Like, we were the first people that had to go to musicians and say to them, here's this new thing called cryptocurrency. Yes, you need Ether. Yes, you need a wallet. And now you need to use it. So we had to educate people, and that was a difficult hurdle in itself. Now there's just way more broader adoption of fiat exchanges and cryptocurrency exchanges and wallets and services. Then the interesting one was language. Nowadays, we just call them NFTs, but that wasn't even a thing that was widely accepted until a few months back, right? Because I tried to, when I was writing about this stuff, I'd call them digital collectibles. But the problem with that is like the difference between using skeuomorphic language and new language. So skeuomorphic language is like you try to make it sound like something that people might know or understand. But if you say digital collectible, people think a centralized virtual sword or a centralized Pokemon or something like that. It doesn't describe why it's different and better. Now, that being said, NFT doesn't either. But when the new language is adopted such that people understand the context of the word, it's more understandable. If you now say NFT, most people understand, oh, it has something to do with the blockchain. But if you say digital collectible, it might still include like the previous set of stuff like a virtual sword in World of Warcraft. And then we also struggled with things like whether things should be scarce or not. And I think that's still a topic of discussion today, which is you have things like open editions that people experiment with, and then one of ones, and then maybe 5 of 5, or generative pieces of a broad set of things. That might have been a mistake on our end. I think if we launched with like scarce badges or scarce things, we might have had like more people that are interested to play with this stuff. And then for the final bit, I just want to touch upon like where we are now, and I think what these lessons take into the future. And to me, I think we're still facing a lot of the same kind of problems, but just in different facets. Like infrastructure costs are now a problem. you just are paying so much fees. So now you go like, should we go to layer two? Now you're stuck in the same problem. Are you the person that's going to build the platform on a new protocol on a new layer two, or are you just going to focus on product, right? What layer are you going to use? And ultimately now it's like, with the NFT boom, you still have to ask the question: do users really care about what's behind the back in the background? You know, we are people that were early in this space, so I would say we care, right? There needs to be some modicum of decentralization, some credible neutrality, the feeling of legitimacy of the underlying infrastructure. But in the NBA Top Shot is one of the most popular NFT platforms, and they don't say blockchain or decentralization anywhere in the thing. And Audius started on a proof of access blockchain, and now it's a big established infrastructure. Do users care? I don't know, and that's still a question that still needs to be answered. So these are the things that we learned along the way, and we were very happy to help experiment with this. And some of the stuff we did is now part of the zeitgeist of the NFT space and music NFT space. So I'm quite happy with what we did with the team. And sometimes you're just early, and uh, and that's also okay. That's part of the difficulty in being building at the bleeding edge. You cut your fingers on a lot of new infrastructure. So thank you very much.